an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Season 1, Episode 9, Created Feelings. In this episode, poor Al. This fucking guy really did a number on him. He's sitting here wondering, very sincerely, if he is a real boy. And finally confronts Ed about it. I gotta confess I was relieved that it happened in the same episode. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. What's up, Max, if you're out there? So yeah, guys, again, and I think I've said this before, I often will expect things to get drawn out with different media because this really, you could milk this plot line for a while. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you were trying to be cheap, you could get a lot of mileage out of a dude thinking that he's actually a robot. And I'm really glad that he just straight up comes out and asks Ed, like, in this episode. Because I started to wonder. And to be honest, I wouldn't even really be mad if they decided to milk this a little bit. Like, there are some things that are deeply frustrating because it's just, if these two people just talked, they would realize that it was a misunderstanding and this entire plot line wouldn't happen. And I hate shit like that. But this is the kind of thing that even if Al talked to Ed and Ed assures him, of course you're real, you could continue this plot anyway, because there's no proof that he could be presented with that could, beyond a shadow of a doubt, indicate indeed that he was real. Anything, if you go into like this kind of conspiracy theory, you can reconstruct absolutely any piece of proof to be part of the conspiracy, you know? So even if we did, like, I wouldn't be mad about it, because there's a very big difference between something that's honestly kind of like an existential question versus something that's like, oh, I misheard you when you were on the phone and I thought you said you were dumping me. If we just had talked for 2 seconds, I would realize that's not what you said. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wouldn't have been like mad about it, because honestly, it is kind of a fascinating like question if you are in his shoes. Like, if you didn't have the stakes involved that he does, who could this be doable? Is this something that could happen in their universe? I mean, we've got sentient ensouled armor walking around. I don't see why just creating false memories would necessarily be like outside the purview of somebody in this universe. But again, I also don't really feel like I've got a grip on the way that a lot of powers work, because it seems like it's a little all over the place so far. So Damien says they put the pedal to the metal with these episodes because they were operating under the assumption people had seen the OG series, so it was full speed ahead. Some people felt it was actually too sudden and should have had more build-up. Yeah, like, so that makes sense. Thank you for that insight, Damien. And I can understand people feeling that way. Like I said, I wouldn't have been mad if they stretched this out a little bit more. But what I like about the fact that Al goes and talks to Ed about it is what it says about their relationship. That they are as straightforward with one another as people who are close can be. You know, it's like, don't get me wrong, he doesn't immediately ask Ed, but also Ed was like unconscious for a minute there, so I guess there's that. But it's pretty soon after this all happened, and he does have a moment where Ed walks by and is like, hey man, are you doing okay? You can come into my room if you want. And he's just like, I'll be there in a minute, don't worry about it. So we do see him pulling away a little bit, but that should happen if you are going through this kind of doubt. Whether you're close to somebody or not, taking some time to yourself to really mull over the implications of it, that just feels smart to me, you know? So I think that what this says is that, in a way, despite Al wondering if maybe Ed's been lying to him this whole time, there's still an element of trust that Al has in Ed to just go to him. You know, I feel like some people, the paranoia would get to them and really put a wedge in their relationship, and they would never even have had the conversation. But it would low-key have like ruined things between them and the other person because they didn't trust the person enough to actually just come out and ask. And to be perfectly honest, I feel like that's kind of how I would handle it. Because, like, I have a hard time trusting people just in general. I don't ever really believe that people are going to be there for me a lot of the time. And so if somebody were like, are you sure this person's actually your brother? Or do you think he just like made you for his own enjoyment? First of all, if I were in this position, I might be convinced. And I would take the sort of vibe that I was mentioning earlier of like anything that you present to me as evidence could be part of the construction that you have created to like, that's all part of this lie. And thus, I don't know that I would ever ask, because what would ever convince me? And what ends up convincing Al? First, his brother storms out, is like horrified and like, do you really think, are you serious? Do you actually think that's what's going on? And he storms out. And Winry is there because she's performing like essentially a house call. It's a hospital call. And she flips out on Al and starts beating him with a wrench, which sounds a lot worse than it is because he's also metal, so it's fine. And is yelling at him about how what Ed wanted to say to you was ask you if you blame him for losing your body. And it's interesting because this whole confrontation between him and Al happens because there's this whole fucking thing with how Ed doesn't want to drink his milk. Which, like, look, I love me a glass of milk and cookies. I love dairy in general. But I really understand if people don't like milk. Like, milk is weird. It's a weird thing that we're doing with milk. Let's be honest, everybody. Like, it's just strange and it's fine. There's no, like, real, like, moral judgment on it. It's fucking strange. And I'm just saying, if somebody doesn't want it, I'm not gonna be like, why? That's so weird. It's not weird. If you like milk, you're more weird, I think. I'm more weird, I think. So anyway, he's having this issue because he doesn't want to drink it. And everybody's like, you have to drink it or you're going to stay small. And he's very mad. And then there's the like little second like return to that conversation that Al has when he is in the room with him and is like, you really should drink it. And Ed says something like, you're kind of lucky about how big you are, or something like this. And I just, look, guys, I'm not mad about it in general because I understand that this is like, in many ways, this is, I don't want to say meant for kids because I don't think it's actually really meant for kids, but it's meant, some of this is meant to be sort of, you just take it as it comes and it's not, you're not supposed to stop and really think about it too much. But I feel like Ed can be so tactless in terms of how much he will forget what it's like actually for Al. And this is just such a great moment because personally, Al reacts in a way that I've been sort of wanting him to for like a minute, where he just yells at him, I didn't ask for this body, you know. And like I said, it's coming from a place that's like not true, but it is the sort of like reminder that Ed needs, I think, sometimes. Because as much as he is apparently eaten up by guilt it doesn't seem like it is as constant when he can like make little jokes and comments that feel that tone deaf. You know, I feel like if you're wrapped up in guilt, you're going to be so much more cautious about the way that you talk to somebody about a thing, because you don't want to bring it up. You don't want to like shine a light on this thing that you're kind of trying to avoid even thinking about. And so the fact that Ed just keeps like, he just makes a lot of like offhand remarks that I'm like, that's kind of on you though, dude. It has rubbed me wrong a few times, as you guys know. And I just really appreciated that Al gets a chance to just yell at him, you know? And it's not even like Al is blaming him in that moment, even though I think you could read it that way. And I'm sure that to a point Ed reads it that way. But I don't think that's what he's doing. I think he's just pointing out to Ed, hey, you're being fucking tactless right now. You realize that, right? Like, this is just one of those things. You guys have been around somebody like this, right? Who they are being so incredibly tone deaf in the moment that you almost can't believe it, that they just said that, and you like let it go because you're stunned and you don't know how to respond. So you just like let it ride. And then later you think about it and you're like, I can't believe that I didn't flip the fuck out on them. I should have fucking said something. I can't believe that I just let that go. And I kind of feel like I want Al to feel that way a little bit to make up for it, you know? Yeah. So I'm going to back up a little here. And again, I'm sorry about the dog barking in the background, guys. I'm sure you guys can hear that. It's just, this is where I live. So this whole, like, this starts off, I love this so much. Ed is talking to the two guards, and guys, remind me what their names are again. We've got Brosh and Ross. Brosh is the dude, and Ross is the woman. Is that right? They are here beside Ed's bed, and they're talking to him about his injuries and, you know, just generally what's going on with him. And this is so amazing, you guys. Ed says, this isn't fair. Do you know how close I was to finding out the truth? There's just no time for me to be lying around in a hospital. As they have just informed him that the laboratory has been completely crumbled to the ground. Nothing remains. There is no evidence left for him to sift through. Just, you know, every place that he's trying to go to get additional info, he's being foiled. And he says this, and they both stand to attention. They look at one another, nod very seriously, turn to him. They stand to attention, and they say, sir, we apologize for this in advance, sir. And then Ross just slaps him across the face in what might be my favorite moment of this show so far. Between this and Ed fucking yelling at him, I got some of what I've been looking for, you know? Because, like, I try to, like, keep in mind how old Ed actually is and everything he's been through, but he can be so fucking irritating. You know? It just aggravates me. And they just slap him and tell him he acted like a spoiled child. He doesn't need to be going out here trying to do everything all by himself. Don't you know that you can lean on people? Which, to be honest, isn't exactly the message that I was, like, wanting. You can lean on people is valid. And I won't disagree that Ed has a problem with trying to go it alone all the time. Like, that's clearly true. He could have gotten somebody involved with trying to like summon his mother back from the dead, but he didn't. It was just him and his infant brother. However, I wanted the message to be more like, you almost got us fucking fired. Did you think about anything about how this was going to impact anyone else when you did this? You're lucky that we were there because your brother almost fucking died. You almost fucking died. Like, there were so many places to take this. And I guess it says something about me, that I would rather they had done something a little bit more punitive than, don't you know that you can rely on us? Which is what they actually went for. It's a much more wholesome message. It makes them seem more like they want what's best for him. So I'm not trying to say it should have been the way that I want. I'm just saying that it's what I wanted. Whether it's good or bad that I wanted it, that's a whole other conversation that I'm not going to get into. But at least Ed gets slapped in the face. At least. Like, I got that. And I'm very happy with that. And then as soon as they do it, they both begin sweating. And they essentially like finish their diatribe and they back up and they're like, all right, sir, sorry about that. And they ask what their punishment is going to be. And he's like, punishment? No, I totally deserve that. What do you mean? And they both sort of like start to fall over because they're so relieved. And then they inform him that state alchemists, they occupy a space that's similar, like a rank of major. Which, does that mean that like Major Armstrong isn't actually of higher rank than Ed is? Because, I've just been assuming that he's above Ed this whole time. And look, he's much older and more experienced, so he is above Ed. That's fine. But I just, I thought that in the hierarchy that was actually true, and it seems like technically it's not true. Which I find surprising, and also, like, I don't love it. Because Ed is he already takes too many liberties, kids. He's already out here just doing whatever the fuck. I don't feel like anybody should be telling him, you actually outrank us, really. Just keep that shit to yourself. Just don't say that. Don't tell him. I just wouldn't tell him. Again, everything about how I would handle Ed would be to try and like reduce his power in some way, because he's just taking shit too goddamn far, just all the time. And he's acting like he learned his lesson. He didn't learn his lesson. Like, he's just doing it in a different way now. Let's see. Damien says, fun fact, Maria Ross's actress had to come back from a trip for the OG series movie in order to record the lines for her character. I think she went to Israel. He's above due to a technicality of being an active member of the military, but otherwise, no, they're of equivalent rank. Kyle says, I might be wrong, but I think in the military, when there's two people with the same rank, the person with seniority is considered the superior officer. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I don't, like, you guys could literally tell me anything and I would believe you, because I don't know how any of this works at all. And, like, is Lieutenant... What... I don't know how these rank. I feel like I've looked this up in the past because I was covering something and I wanted to know. And I always forget how that shit goes. Anyway, okay. So this scene of them slapping him, it goes on for a minute. And when he says I deserved it, and they calm down, Brosh says, I guess we were scared of the brat for nothing. I guess we were scared of the brat for nothing. I swear to God. Oh, that killed me. And Ed is so irritated. They just like, they went from being really scared of him to like, oh, it's fine. He's so mad. Good. So this is when we go to the conversation with Winry. And this was extremely surprising. And I don't know if this is like going to mean anything later, but what we get from this is that Winry was really fucking tired when she made his arm in 4 days, and she forgot to put a bolt in. So his arm gets fucked up, and she naturally assumes it is because she fucked up. Which, I mean, look, if you're gonna, like, press somebody to do 4 straight days, I think it might have been 3. It was like 4 counting them arriving and leaving. Let's say 3 straight days of all-nighters. And you think that they're going to come out with the same quality product they would on a good night's sleep. You deserve what you get. I'm not mad at Winry, in other words. Like, this is not... I just don't... It's fine. The only thing that irritated me was her deciding to make it less strong. Because that feels like he lost his arm in a fight. Why would you decide to do that? That still remains a question for me. I was surprised that it didn't come up at all at this point. Because, you know, I thought that he would mention that at least. But, yeah, so she doesn't tell him about the thing with the bolt. And when she arrives, she agrees to, like, come all the way into town and see him in the hospital. She tells him that she's not going to charge him because this is her fault. And Ed is like, it's not your fault. I mean, the arm, like, gave out at exactly the right time, because if I had kept fighting, I would have died. And it was because I got in this stupid fight. So why would it be your fault? And when she hears that, she immediately perks up. She changes her tune entirely and tells him that she's going to charge him premium rates. She's going to give him, like, you know, because of her travel and everything. And I was so proud of her. Good for you. This is one of those things that I really, like, struggle with. And you guys know this. With Spoil Me, it's been really hard because I have had to raise my prices because the expense of a lot of things has gone up, as I'm sure all of you have experienced as well in the world. And it is really difficult to actually price myself at a point that's, like, reasonable. And because I want everybody to be able to afford to buy episodes if they can't, like, you know what I mean? I hate pricing people out completely. But also, I mean, this isn't exactly like a meat and potatoes necessary service. So I guess I shouldn't be that. Ugh. But there have been times where people have been like, I can't believe you only charge blank, blank, blank. And I'm like, I mean, I just feel weird. You know, I've added some fees for certain things since starting and changed the way, but it's really hard. So watching Winry just be like unapologetically, oh, okay, well, yeah, you're getting charged double. You know that, right? I was like, oh, I sometimes wish that I could have that energy a little bit, you know, like not to the point where I'm gouging. It's hard to, like, determine that sort of thing. And I'm sure her grandmother is, like, a great force in that respect. I would imagine that she would have done a lot to ingrain in her granddaughter that you should charge what you're worth. We do, like, really amazing custom work, and this is how much people should be paying for it. That is her granddaughter, right? Do we know what happened to Winry's mother? I feel like they mentioned it in the last episode where her grandmother was saying that she was a drinking buddy of Ed's father, but I can't remember what they said. Oh, Candace, you're right. Candace says, keep in mind, Ed is paying her with his military salary, so she's really just charging the government. That's true. Yeah, if I were charging the government for my episodes, I would definitely have a different attitude about this. That's true. So, okay. So she comes, she tells him she's going to charge him extra. She does fix the arm, but in the midst of this, guys, fucking Hughes comes in and he says to Ed, I heard you had a pretty young girl come into your room to service you. Hughes, what are you doing? I don't like it. Hughes, at the very least, bar on the floor. You have a daughter. Just don't. What are you doing? I don't like it. I didn't appreciate this. However, I will say, did he look hotter this episode than usual? I feel like he looked hotter. Like, there was more than one moment where I was like, what's up? Oh, shit. Okay. Damn. And I sort of thought that he was, like, gonna low-key start flirting with Winry. I was so glad that I was wrong about this. I'm so prepared for, like, any dude character to be a fucking creep. You know? Like, it's just, as a young woman, I was hit on by so many men who had no goddamn business talking to me the ways that they did, either because they were far too old or because they were far too married or anything. And so I just I'm on my guard in respect to a dude like this being alone in a room with a young pretty girl like Winry. And after he fucking says that too, Ed is like, she's my mechanic. What are you talking about? And Hughes is like, oh, so you seduced your mechanic. And I was like, all right, man, I can't tell you. At this point, I don't know if you're like purposely misunderstanding. It feels purposeful. It feels like you're actively trying to not understand him because you're like trying to make him uncomfortable. And it would be funny if it were only him that he was making uncomfortable. Like if Winry wasn't in the room and Hughes made this joke, I might find it funny because it's just meant to be a little joshin'. But because Winry's standing right there, I was just like, man, can you put a fucking sock in it? Stop. Knock it off. Get out of here. And then it turns all the way around because he tells Winry that she can stay with them. And she stays with them for a couple nights. She's in town for a few nights. I'll be honest, I was really hoping something would happen to get Winry to like be a permanent part of the team in the city. I enjoy her. And I think that if she's as crucial to Ed's abilities as she seems, it would probably behoove them to employ her full time. I wouldn't want her separated from her grandmother, though. So her grandmother would have to move out here also. And they just don't feel like city people. I think that they wouldn't like it. But I would like it. I would like it very much if we could get the team localized in one place and therefore have like more interactions between the two of them, you know? Where are Ed and Al staying actually these days? Because like the series started off with them staying with Hughes as well. And I don't feel like we've seen them at home at any point. Are they still staying with him? Or what's the deal with that? Erica says, I thought of it more as Hughes teasing Ed in a kind of immature way. Like, oh, Ed's got a girlfriend, but I see where you're coming from. Too many men are creeps and forgot Winry was in the room. Michael says their Winry trial expires after 40 days. It's not a free trial by any means, but... because like, here's what I'm thinking. The reason I'm asking where they're staying is, could we get a cool, like, crowded house situation where Ed and Al and Winry and her grandma all live together in like a place in the city and it's like headquarters. That's what I feel like the show is missing a little bit. And it might be something that in the manga is a little bit more like purposeful. Like maybe it's not like this, but when you've got a sort of ensemble cast in something, you need a place where everybody can gather at any point and it doesn't have to be like an emergency situation to just like bounce off each other and talk. And they really need a place that is the default for everybody to just go and hang out. You know, in Buffy, it eventually became the magic shop. Dresden has his apartment. You know, I just want there to be something like that. And it would also work because it's like, if it's a residence and it's not a government building, there would be a lot more sort of leeway for them to do weird shit or for them to hide there and people wouldn't necessarily know where they are. Like, we could make it sort of a secret location. I don't know, something like that. So I don't know. I would be interested in that because I just really like the dynamic of all of them together. And I'm super curious about Grandma's relationship with Ed's dad. And I don't mean like relationship, but you know what I mean? Like, what? She knows something. I just feel like she's hiding something. And I don't even know if hiding is the right word. I think it probably is, though. I think hiding is the right word. But I just get the impression that there is like some information that I don't necessarily think is crucial to anything, but I think would be personally significant somehow. At least something that Ed would like to know and Al would like to know, that kind of thing, you know? Or it may not feel like it's crucial information, but when you actually like stand back and look at these other situations, it turns out to be. Because look, Ed is on this list of dudes that you can't fuck with because he's part of the sacrifice. And it's possible that it's just because of what he did with trying to summon his mother back. And that marked him in some way. And that's fine. If that's what it is, completely acceptable. No problem with that. It could also be who his dad was and what happened to him that somehow marked Ed out. And if it were, it would be understandable if Al weren't also wrapped up in it because Ed's the eldest. I would accept that also. This is all, as you all know, complete and total conjecture. I have absolutely no evidence in any direction. It just feels like when you've got kids who are parentless and there is an adult in their lives who has helped raise them, the trope always is that adult knows something that they don't share and that they keep intending to share, maybe, once the kid's ready. And like the kid just never really seems ready because that's just, you know, easy to tell yourself. Or they didn't intend to share because they didn't really see the point, or because it would change the way that kid looked at them forever. And so they just decided, you know what? It's not going to help anything and it might actually hurt things. So never mind. I won't do it. So that's why I'm kind of going in that direction with it. Candace says, Pinnacle is sketch as fuck. She just stands there with her glass and pipe, knowing things, not saying shit. Erica says, the Dumbledore of it all. Exactly. Exactly. And look, guys, I don't know, like, have you ever, there might be somebody actually who's listening who is adopted. And I've often wondered how parents approach telling their child that they are adopted. Because, like, I could really understand never telling them because you just never feel like the time is right for that kind of conversation because it's so massive. Like, what a huge thing. And of course, I don't think it's right. You should tell them. It's wrong to keep that information to yourself. But I am a perfectionist in like so many areas of my life. And I would be the one waiting for the perfect moment, trying to set it up to have this like intimate, private time where we're not going to be interrupted. And like, that can be really hard to set up. And I don't know. I just, that would be a difficult conversation. And I just feel like with everything and the way it all went down and him trying to bring his mom back, you maybe feel like you don't want to stoke that fire any further by adding fucking weirdness to it, you know? Okay, so getting back to this. So I pretty much talked off the top about what happened with Al, but I'm going to talk about what happens right after, because Al, he has his outbursts. It's not like I asked for this body, brother. then he says, I think I know what it was that you wanted to tell me. And Ed says something like, we can get your real body back. I promise I'm going to do it. And Al is like, believe you? How am I supposed to believe anything when I'm stuck in this body? What should I believe in? My memories? They're just scraps of information that can be made up as easily as anything else. And this is when he's like, I know what you were trying to tell me. Ed gets up, runs out of the room. Winry beats him with a wrench. And then we see a flashback of Ed, and he's in his hospital bed talking about how he is supposed to be the big brother who looks out for his little brother. And he lost him his entire body, almost killed him. And he will have to blame me. And Grandma is like, he isn't the type to resent you for this. And I'm like, I don't feel that I know a single soul that I could say that about. And maybe it's just that Al is such a young kid, but anybody loses somebody their entire body, they're going to resent the person who did that to them. Al is truly a blessing. Ed is so lucky to have somebody as forgiving is not even an adequate word as Al for a brother, because anybody else, this would just have ruined everything between them. It's wild because it feels like, if anything, this whole thing brought them together more, but that isn't how I think it would go most of the time. So, and as it turns out, Pinico is right. His brother doesn't hold it against him until this whole fucking thing is put in his head. But it's just, when she says it, if I didn't know Al and see already how this went, I would have been like, are you kidding? Of course he's going to resent him. How could you possibly avoid that? That's just a natural reaction. So then Winry, she, we had the flashback and she's explaining to him, and she's still hitting him with the wrench and saying, and then you said that. Who would ever do something like that? Who would be prepared to risk his own life to create a fake brother? Don't you get it? All the two of you have left is each other. And this was sort of a weird thing because I didn't really understand what she was suggesting he thought here. She says, who would be willing to risk his own life to create a fake brother? I don't think that's what Al thinks happened. She's sort of framing it like the summoning your mother back from the dead never actually happened. It was an implanted memory to cover up him creating you. That sounds like what she's suggesting Al's theory is on this. Which he never said, and I didn't think that's what he meant. So her saying, why would he risk his life to create a fake brother? I thought what she was going to say was, why would he risk his life to protect a fake brother? Because Ed has put himself in harm's way for Al's sake more than once. And that just, for me, made a lot more sense. He has, and maybe it's that she doesn't know that. I don't know how much she's aware of that having happened. But, we have seen how many times Ed has just been straight up willing to die. And he had to get yelled at by Al afterwards. And so, yeah, I thought this was going to go in a different direction. And I just felt like I kind of maybe misunderstood either what Al thinks happened, or she's misunderstanding Al's, but I don't think she's misunderstanding Al, because when she says this, he doesn't correct her or push back on that at all. So I think it's supposed to be that what she says is what he is thinking. Erica says, I think she's suggesting that creating Al would be incredibly dangerous and possibly cost Ed's life. Would it though? That's a big assumption. And to say who would even do that to him is to assume that, like, Al would be aware that would be the risk Ed was taking. I don't know. Either way, it feels like something about that I didn't realize what was going on, actually. And I expected a totally different line to come out of her mouth than did. But it doesn't really matter. It was just sort of, like, interesting to me that I was clearly on a different page. So, yeah, she tells him to get up and go talk to your brother. And I love this. He gets up slowly, and then she yells at him, start running. And he does, which I just really enjoy. Anytime that somebody is, like, obeying orders, but they're fucking not doing it. Like, you know, I love it when somebody is like, are you going to fucking pull it together, please? Are we going to speed things up here? Thank you. Pick up the pace. I just really... Winry is an MVP in this episode for sure. Erica says bonding his soul to the armor cost him a limb. But did it? See, this is where we go, Erica. Because then everything could be fake. Like, we don't know anything at that point. If he doesn't think he's a real boy and he was just made... Like, Ed's arm could not even have been related to him. It might not have had anything to do with him. You know, like, it's just one of those things that you could say Al thinks anything. And honestly, I would have to be like, oh, okay. Because if you're going to go with this fucking conspiracy theory that everybody's been lying to you about you being a real kid, like, anything is possible once you decide to open that door. But it doesn't matter. It's fine. So this is when he goes upstairs and Ed is up there waiting, and Al starts to say something and Ed says, we haven't had a good fight in a while. I'm starting to get flabby. And he takes his shoes off and he runs at his brother right away and kicks him. And Al is like, hey, what are you doing? Wait, hold on. Stop it. And Ed just goes for it. And Al is saying, like, your wounds haven't healed enough. You can't be doing this, which truly, there comes a point at one, like, he sneezes or yells and there's a gush of red that comes out of his stomach as if to suggest he broke his stitches, like tore them out from the force of his yell, and his wound is just gaping again. But then in this scene, he's literally doing flips in the air and he is fine. And I was just like, it's fine. But yeah, he eventually wraps Al in a sheet and takes him down and then is like, I won. And Al says, that wasn't really a fair fight. And Ed says, a win is a win. And you know it. We've always fought like this. Ever since we were really little. And then they begin to reminisce together about the things that they have been through. And again, if Al were determined to keep on believing what he believes, this wouldn't make any impression on him, because all of this could be invented memories. It could be Ed reinforcing the programming that he installed. You know, like... But because he's already had this conversation with Winry and seen her emotional response to everything, I mean, you could say Winry's just acting, but, like, come on. No, she's clearly not acting. And they finally, Ed says, like, as after they talk about various things they've been through, are you telling me that all those memories are lies? And your determination to be whole again, to get your body back no matter what, that's a lie too? And Al says, no, it's not. And Ed is like, you're goddamn right it's not. We're going to keep pushing forward. And we are going to continue getting better and stronger until we get our shit together. And Al says, and the milk? And he's like, ugh, fine. I'll drink the fucking milk. So, as as they are talking to each other, we have Winry and Hughes looking on. And earlier, like, Winry, she is sitting in Hughes's house, and his daughter had her birthday party. And it's so weird, guys. Everybody, like, there's a cake brought out, and they yell, like, happy birthday, Amelia, whatever her name is. And Winry turns to Hughes and says, what's this all about? And he says, it's my daughter's birthday. And I'm like, Winry, they just put a cake in front of his daughter and told her happy birthday. What do you think is going on here? Why are you asking this question? Context clues, sweet baby. What are you doing? And it's weird. She has this, like, reaction when he tells her that. Like, she's so shocked. And I don't know, is it supposed to be that, like, I can't believe he invited me to stay with them when his daughter's party was tonight, I guess? It was just weird. And then eventually she asks how old his daughter is to her face, and she says 2, and then she stops and says 3. And the two of them freak out over how cute she is. And they have a conversation while his daughter is sitting in Winry's lap, which I've got to say is so weirdly distracting. Because they just have, like, from the hairline up of his daughter. So even though I know that she's, like, looking down at something in her hands when she's sitting in Winry's lap, it looks almost like she's facing Winry, which in itself almost looks like Winry is breastfeeding her. It's a weird, like, the angle and everything. I wish they hadn't done it that way. It's fine, but I just kept being like, what the fuck? And then they'd pull out again, and I'm like, oh, okay, right. And Winry and Hughes talk about what the deal is with men and emotions. And Hughes says that when guys are going through a difficult time, they don't want to burden other people with it. They want to be able to get through it themselves. And this is just one of those unfortunate things, because fucking patriarchy, guys. It's so funny because, like, so many dudes will yell about how women actually have it better. And then to support their argument, they will, like, cite exactly what the patriarchy has in fact done to them, not women. But the whole thing with men not wanting to share when they're going through something difficult, it's like him saying they don't want to burden people with it might be true. But I really do think it's much more about not wanting to appear weak. It's not about a concern for burden, because, like, look, so much of how men are taught to behave societally is to be a burden to women. I'm just going to say it. Women are meant to carry the burden of men's existence outside of work. That's the one thing that dudes are supposed to be, like, solely responsible for, is providing, having a job. And otherwise, women have been historically expected to handle literally everything else. So he doesn't want to be a burden rings a little hollow to me on that. You know, it's part of why, like, the term man flu exists, because, like, the joke is supposed to be that when women get sick, we are just expected to fucking keep going as best we can. Men get sick and it's the end of the fucking world. That's not true across the board. You know, obviously, hashtag not all men. Owen, when he gets sick, he's not, like, a huge baby about it at all. In fact, he should take more time off probably. But what I think it is a lot more about, like, how you're perceived, your reputation, whether you appear to be weak, whether you're showing weakness to people who might take advantage in some way, or whether you think you're, like, losing ground. Some people approach relationships as, like, points systems where you lose and gain points depending on certain behaviors. And a lot of guys appearing weak, they think that's losing points somehow and puts them at some sort of disadvantage. And there's also the aspect of, like, some guys just don't even know how they feel. because women are socialized to be more in touch with that and to be able to recognize our feelings more. The inverse of that, though, is that while we are taught to recognize our feelings, we are also then taught to second guess them and minimize them and dismiss them and basically like gaslight ourselves. We've gotten very good at it. Men, though, they're not taught how to tell exactly what it is they're feeling, and that means that they turn most emotions into anger of some kind, because anger is seen as a masculine acceptable emotion. And you know, it manifests like in various ways. Anger can be really like passive aggressive. It doesn't have to be necessarily like physically violent, but it can result in the same sort of like stunted attitude and lack of understanding. And so sometimes I think when women are like, you got to tell me what's going on with you, and a guy is like, nothing's going on, I think sometimes they genuinely believe that, you know, because like, why wouldn't they? How else would they know? So, you know, he's talking about this and saying like, sometimes it's not about what is said. Sometimes you have to look at what people do, their actions. That's what like men are taught to speak with, is their actions. And I actually do think that is somewhat true. This is something that I wish I had really understood better when I was like younger and my father was still alive, because my father was just so withholding in so many ways in terms of sharing how he felt. Like he would tell me he loved me, which I know is a lot more than some people get. But he could be really strange about certain things. And yet he would do things like fix my car for me or buy me like a piece of furniture that I needed but couldn't afford. And I don't think I really understood at the time that that was him telling me that he loved me. I didn't understand what it meant to him. And so I just sort of took it as a thing he did and didn't really like fully appreciate the meaning behind it. And thus I didn't like, there were times where I could have spent time with him while he was like helping me with my car. And I didn't. I sort of like left him to it and went inside and like talked with his wife and, you know, that sort of thing. And I think about that a lot. There's probably a lot of men out there who, what they do is they provide services to their family, their children. And that is them expressing their love. And that's how they've been taught to do it. And it's not invalid. It's just when two people are on such different pages in terms of how they communicate with each other, you fucking miss it. And it's a shame, you know? I feel like I never really understood that was what was happening until after he was gone. And it's just a real shame. So to a degree, I think that he's right. And Winry clearly also, to a degree, thinks that he's right. But then in this moment when they're watching the brothers, she says to him, look, I get what you mean, and sometimes actions are important, but sometimes just saying things out loud is important too. And Hughes very gracefully is like, yeah, all right, you know what? I guess it is. And it was just a nice moment. I didn't really expect that conversation to like come back around and be meaningful again. And the fact that it was, I was just kind of like pleased by the way that they decided to bring it full circle. So then in the last section, we go to Scar. And we've got this fucking dude, Kimbley is what it says in the dub. I'm a state alchemist and I have been sent to exterminate this sector. It's a flashback. He is so excited to do this too. It's really awful. Scar is standing there in the midst of the wreckage of like his village. He says something about his master being gone. I'm going to jump back a little bit here. I should mention too that like his red eyes are really like wild because I'm so used to seeing him with the glasses and him not having them on. I kept being like, wait, who is this? Oh, right. I don't think I realized how much I was associating him with his glasses. So yeah, he looks around and says, "My brother, master, they're gone, all gone." And this is when Kimberly yells at him from like the top of a cliff. And he's like, "You don't look Ishvalan, who are you?" And Kimberly fucking tells him. And he does this like alchemy. There's light coming out of his palms. And it's red. And then it just goes blank. And we're waking up with Scar in the present because he was found in the sewer. He doesn't, like, in that scene, when Kimberly tells him I'm a state alchemist, Scar doesn't try to fight back at all. And I don't mean, like, fight. I mean, like, he doesn't try to use alchemy. And I'm wondering, did he not have alchemy at that point? Or maybe he did and it just cuts before we get to see it, you know? I don't know. There's something about Scar's type of alchemy and the way it works that makes me feel like it's unusual in some way. And I don't know if it's just the way he practices it or if it's because of the source. Maybe it's not natural. I don't know. But it just kind of caught my attention. And Kimberly, I'm pretty sure, is the one that's in that prison, right? And keeps like talking about how beautiful the songs of destruction are. He's very fucking dramatic, very emo. This is a dude who would absolutely like have one of those bands where he just sings about how beautiful death is and shit. And anyway, so Scar wakes up and these people are also Ishvalan survivors and they are in hiding. And essentially these people are like, yeah, we found them. We found you in the sewer and we are definitely not going to sell you out. So don't worry about it. And this dude, like this old man, has a really great attitude about how, and I say great, it's one of those things where I'm like, he says something about how we don't need our homeland to be a people because our God watches out for us wherever we are. The whole world is his, you know? And it's like a beautiful sentiment. And I totally respect that this could bring somebody comfort. But also, I'm just like, but it's not okay, dude. It's not okay at all. Somebody exterminated your people or tried. Like, just, it's okay to be like mad about that. So he thinks back and remembers what happened with lust and what do you call them? Gluttony. And he winces and he asks the boy, did I lose my arm or is it still with me? And the kid is like, ooh, cool tattoo. No, your arm is fine. And he says, it's important to me, a precious gift. And then says, from my family, and like squints in this way. And I'm like, okay, is the tattoo where he's getting his ability from or what? Because like that flashback, I'm going to go back to it real quick. I feel like it showed Gluttony grabbing his arm somehow. And I don't know if that was actually significant. No. Okay. So he grabs Gluttony's face and then we see Lust run up to him and then it cuts out. And then he asks, is my right arm okay? So yeah, I don't know. It's got a bunch of symbols on it. Like maybe it's a source of his power and he's not like a normal alchemist. And when he says it's a precious gift from my family, the way he says from my family, I'm like, is that true? Or are you saying that because you're calling somebody family who isn't really? I don't like, he just seems angry when he says it. But if it gives him his alchemy, I would think that he would be happy about it. I don't know what, unless it's supposed to be, he's technically part of the crew that Lust and Gluttony are with. That doesn't make any sense. It's like he had a brother and a master in his little town in Ishval. I don't feel like that works. I don't know what he's saying. I'm just all straight up. But I am delighted that he is still alive and that we're getting to find that out pretty quickly. I find him to be a pretty compelling character. I enjoy him. Let's see. Damien says, I will admit the series could have benefited from the inclusion of Bracha/Brothers from the OG series. That song was freaking beautiful and would have fit this episode perfectly. I don't know what you're talking about, Damien, but I trust you. Do I trust you? I guess I trust you. It's fine. So that's the end of the episode. And there was no post-credit scene on this one. I double-checked with Max's. Max sent me a list of which ones had it. So I didn't keep watching it. But yeah, I'm pretty interested in where this is all going, guys. I'm really intrigued. I feel like the show's going in a direction I wasn't really expecting. And it keeps doing that. It keeps surprising me. And I am not easy to surprise these days, I feel like. So it's always nice. I like it when that happens. All right, I'm going to wrap up, but thank you again very much to Max for commissioning this. Thank you to everybody who comes and hangs out in the chat. I really appreciate all of you. And I will be seeing you again on Friday with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.